Now we will shift our attention to Europe. Germany, as a unified nation, was quite young, only truly formed around 1870. After the Great War, the Allies divided it again. They created Poland, a nation that hadn't existed independently for centuries, effectively cutting Germany in two. They'd also carved up the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, creating Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, and more. The result? Weakening Germany, especially economically. The crippling reparations burdened the German economy, leading their government to a disastrous solution: printing vast amounts of money. As we know, when money isn't backed by anything, it becomes worthless. This, on top of the Great Depression, caused immense suffering for the German people. Germany's government, formed after the Kaiser abdicated, was a republic, but with many Jewish members in key positions. This fueled a dangerous belief in Germany: the idea that Jews had sold out their country, somehow engineering a surrender when Germany could have won. This was completely untrue, but that belief took hold. Fueling this dangerous line of thinking was Adolf Hitler, who laid out his twisted vision in his book Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle. He promoted the false narrative that Jews had betrayed Germany, while simultaneously proclaiming the superiority of the German master race. His racist worldview created a hierarchy with Germans at the pinnacle, followed by other Europeans in descending degrees of worthiness. Americans, due to their diverse population, were considered much lower. Hitler's plan began with uniting all German-speaking people into Greater Germany, or the Third Reich. Then he would focus eastward, claiming that the Untermenschen, subhumans of Eastern Europe, were undeserving of their lands. Under the guise of Lebensraum, living space, he sought to conquer and exploit those territories for Germany's expansion. Those standing in the way were not just to be defeated, but exterminated. Shockingly, Hitler was horrifyingly open about these plans in Mein Kampf. People bought into his ideas. Desperate Germans, amidst their suffering, were receptive to Hitler's scapegoating. This gave their anxieties a target. Let's be clear, anti-Semitism wasn't Hitler's invention. It was a sadly persistent strain in European culture dating back centuries. What Hitler did was weaponize it. He harnessed and amplified existing prejudice to gain power. This is something I want you to be aware of. When any politician starts their rise by defining a group as the enemy, whether based on race, nationality, or religion, they're manipulating our worst instincts. The goal is always consolidating power. The promise is, give me power. I'm the only one strong enough to fix this threat. This is the blueprint for authoritarianism. It manifested horrifically in Germany, and with variations in other places like Italy. I want to make sure this is clear. The U.S. had a more complex propaganda situation. While Germany's anti-Semitism was open and widespread, the U.S. also harbored its own anti-Semitic sentiments. These were often fueled by earlier waves of Eastern European immigration, as you saw in the Meacham book. This prejudice framed Jews as both foreigners and tied to the age-old but false accusation that Jews killed Jesus. Sadly, this thinking was prevalent enough that a ship of Jewish refugees fleeing Germany was denied entry into the U.S. only to later be forced back to Germany and into the concentration camps. It's important to understand that the kind of racism Hitler weaponized wasn't unique to Germany. It exists in varying forms throughout the world, including the U.S. even today. The recent rise in attacks against Asian Americans due to misplaced COVID blame is a horrifying example. This kind of thinking disrupts unity and solves absolutely nothing. In Germany, where a majority shared a white European identity, Hitler exploited that identity to create a false sense of racial unity. He promoted a fictional Aryan ideal with no historical basis, yet people embraced it because the message felt empowering. Hitler was elected chancellor, which is like a prime minister, by violence, scapegoating, and scheming. As a true authoritarian populist, his extreme conservative ideology resonated with many, and the Nazi Party became the majority party. His lackeys in the Reichstag, the legislature, used their majority to sweep away constitutional protections against dictatorship, which soon placed Hitler beyond the law and in absolute control. He was then able to set in motion the plan he had outlined in Mein Kampf. He began by annexing Austria and the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a significant German population. Finally, on September 1, 1939, he invaded Poland, the trigger for Britain and France to declare war. However, serious fighting doesn't begin until spring 1940, when Hitler turns his attention to France. The strategy mirrors Germany's approach in the previous war: quickly defeat France to focus on the East. This was based on the Schlieffen Plan, which had failed in World War I, but sadly succeeded this time. France fell swiftly, leaving Hitler free to look eastward. Ultimately, it's the fight in the east where Germany will exhaust itself and lose the war, but we'll get to that later. The key point is by 1940, most of Europe was under German control or influence. Only Britain stood in defiance. Why was Britain relatively safe? The English Channel was a formidable barrier against sending tanks and troops. At this point, Churchill, Britain's Prime Minister, was desperately trying to bring the U.S. into the war. Remembered in World War I, the U.S. and Britain weren't allies. However, a stronger sense of shared values emerged between the wars, and Churchill leveraged that connection. He appealed to Roosevelt to defend democracy against Hitler and Mussolini, and Roosevelt, recognizing the threat, was receptive. This led to the ABC talks off the coast of Newfoundland, America, Britain, and Canada. A key outcome was the agreement that should the U.S. enter the war in a potential conflict with Japan, they would also declare war on Germany and prioritize defeating the threat in Europe. This was crucial because Germany jeopardized the Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to its Indian Empire. So even before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. had effectively committed to sending troops to Europe. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.